All right, welcome everyone to the editor group 14.5 kickoff meeting. I believe that's the milestone we're talking about. Yeah. And as always, I'll start off with some highlights from the last milestone and chime in if I missed anything. Not related to shipping issues, but I wanted to highlight some really amazing collaboration and both async and pairing sessions that have been happening on the source editor architecture. I've been watching it, and as much as I can understand it, it seems like it's been really productive and really great to see the collaboration there. So I just wanted to highlight that as a right off the top from the last milestone, something that I think is working really well. And the second most important highlight that I have in the agenda is I single-handedly, without any help from anybody or any Googling, shipped a huge feature in the content editor. And so I'm going to give myself all credit. Enrique helped me out with, and by helped out, I mean, wrote 98% of the code that I didn't copy and paste from Stack Overflow to get color chips to render in the static site. I mean, I said static site of the content editor. And meanwhile, while I was distracting him with that, also managed to ship a bunch of other stuff along with Himanshu. And Paul, you contributed the table of contents issue in this milestone. But we also got front matter. Himanshu was working on the HTML tags and got that merged. The math markup, which ended up being a little more complex than we maybe hoped it was going to be. You got that across the finish line in 14.4, Enrique. So thank you for that. And I promise I won't try and pick up too many more issues because I felt like mostly I was just distracting you. But I'm glad you had a little bit of time to help me finish that up. Thank you.
I think that we got surprised by the complexity of color ships. We started thinking, yeah, oh, this is gonna be easy. It's just displaying a color next to a text. It was quite complex.
It was. I really liked watching, being part of the MR and watching the comments go back and forth was nice, even though I didn't see it through. I was very interested in the path that took through the feedback cycle. So that was great to watch. It would have been great if it was as easy as like taking the regex that we use on the markdown parser already in GFM and using it in ours, and then just like decorating the element, but it was a little more complex. We closed the issue that had CEO interest, the open web ID using the period, the dot key, single keyboard shortcut to launch the web ID from any repository view or merge request. That's it's a great shortcut. It's very timely. There's a lot of social media chatter about quickly launching dev environments. So I think this puts us in a good position to be in the same conversation. I think it's also just a nice little convenience. Not that it was that hard to press the web ID button at the top of the page, but I think everybody likes a keyboard shortcut.
Actually, there was one thing that we have. We didn't have the open web ID button, but now we have the keystroke there. Like if one goes to commits or to pipeline tab on the merge request, there was no web ID button there, but now the keystroke still works there.
Good call. I'll maybe I'll amend the release post, but there's another day before that needs to go out. I think this is a good call out. Thank you. Yeah. And there was a bug fix that you squeezed in there, Dennis, to fix the syntax highlighting when you create a new file. So that's always it's always nice to have consistency there. Squash some bugs. And then we had a moderately exciting week last week with our company going through an IPO. So that also was something to celebrate from the last milestone. The fact that you all did all of that while leading up to such a big momentous occasion and stayed focused and shipped code is great. So thank you for that. I don't think I missed anything, at least from this group. Maybe I should say that I don't have a lot of particular insight into what Chad and Fran are shipping over while they're on the manage access, but I have to assume they're shipping amazing work. So we should celebrate that as well. They're doing very good work over there. I know for a fact that they're making progress and making a good impression, representing our team well. So.
Yeah, I can confirm they're doing an awful lot of really good stuff over on Manage, and they're consistently closing out infra-dev bugs and a lot of linear scalability problems that were plaguing the Manage team. So I'm getting some really nice feedback from the Manage team about them.
I'll just run through our milestone goals. I recorded the kickoff right before I took some PTO, and the general gist of the next milestone is that our backend team is still allocated for managed access. So we're going to focus on some more front end stuff. Web ID state redesign. I know we're getting close. We may or may not be wrapping it up, but continued progress there. We're very excited to keep working on that. And then Paul, we talked about afterwards, a quarterly goal and potentially chipping away at it in this milestone to establish the goals and start planning the work for the GraphQL observability effort. And that would be something we can start pairing up on, or yeah.
Some clarification of what's going on in this realm is there's one GraphQL observability issue that has I've been told is top priority, and so I've had to do this at different orders than I thought I was going to. So the web ID state redesign is not having as much momentum as I would like, implying that when it does, it should be it should be effective. I feel bad that we planned this out and it's been delayed, but I guess such is the nature when there's multiple priorities demanding attention. And yeah,
absolutely, don't feel bad at all. I know the work you're doing that does get prioritized is helpful, and it's all serving for a more reliable and secure code base, which is our company's primary focus. We will also continue working on some of the source editor extension architecture work, the proofs of concept coming out of those pairing sessions and collaborative feedback sessions. I think the specific issues that we have planned are a little light, but we have some work to find there. And then the content editor, we have a few things going on. I think, so David and I talked about this might be a good milestone, especially given some of the PTO that's happening, to get Dennis to contribute a little bit if there's time. Again, there's a lot of demands on everybody's time. So if there's time to get Dennis to help get familiar with that code base, pitch in on keeping momentum going. We're looking to implement the toggle between the classic editor and the content editor without losing changes. That's our next big step before we really make it kind of a production ready workflow. The HTML comments issue was one that came up, which is an interesting little problem, which is, template comments, they just get kind of stripped out right now. Going into the content editor. So we want to find a way to display those correctly, handle them correctly in the content editor and preserve them. And as a stretch, there's an issue to handle pasting larger amounts of markdown into the content editor and having it parse. That's a big issue though. So if we don't ship it this milestone, that's no problem. But generally that's our focus for the next milestone. I think there's some great improvements, and if we can continue keeping up the work in those 3 areas, we'd be in a great place. So that's it for me. We can move on to the open agenda. I saw this in Slack, and I will admit that I could use like a 30-second primer on what it means and how I should feel about it.
Sorry about that. I was just offering some assistance to our lovely release post team as they get into as many merge conflicts as humanly possible.
Always.
Let me just give a little bit of a primer. So yeah, so I threw this into, so this was spurred on by Dennis's great suggestion about maybe we would like to look at considering being leaders in this area as we look to formalize a rollout process plan across the organization. So this was something that was suggested as the brainchild of Michelle Gill to help reduce the likelihood of incidents as we go through shipping out code and to make things a little more stable and a little more reliable. At the moment, it's an opt-in process, so it's not completely mandatory, but it is, you know, there's a good chance if it works, it will be a mandatory process. So I like the idea of us getting ahead of ourselves and looking to use it in our process de facto by default and see if we can suggest maybe some improvements, if we can look at altering the process to be better and smoother. But it's essentially something that comes with buy-in from the developers and the team. So I would like to know what everybody thinks, if this is something you would be interested in, you know, taking part of and leading, or whether or not we feel that this might just add a layer of, you know, extra bureaucracy and workflow that we don't see any value with.
I think that this process may add overhead to certain deliverables, right? It's something that we probably should discuss at the start of a milestone, to which deliverables it adds value. Like I think that it really depends on the degree of complexity of the feature that we are shipping.
It's technically, I totally agree with you, Enrique, and that's what I wrote in my comments there as well. This process is not for every single merge request, for every single thing we ship, but there are two things technically that we have to keep in mind when we classify that or not a merge request, whether it's a good fit for this process. So first, if we are about to set the feature label for the merge request, this already yields that this is a new feature. We have to be extra cautious and extra carefully, like take an extra care of quality here. So this yields for rollout plan implementation. And also another thing is, even if it's a not new feature, but it's something that our group has claimed we will shape, like from the meetings like today, when we say, okay, for this milestone, these are the main features we are going to ship. So the core merge requests for those features should have the rollout plan as well, I think. But definitely it's not for like fixing tiny bugs or something like that. That's not the case. That's going to be very inconvenient overhead. But to give an example, I wrote in my last comment on the poll, we had a real life example this very week where there was a merge request that we shipped, we merged, the pipeline was green, all great, and then all of a sudden we get an incident. So simply because the package and QA job hasn't been run on the merge request, and had it been run, it would fail on the merge request right away. So as to incident popped up, we had to revert the merge request right away. But we have to revert, we have to contact the merge request author, notify them, and like work through the process of resubmitting the feature, accounting for the things that were broken. How does the rollout plan work in this case? So if that merge request would have a rollout plan that would clearly state what to do when the things go wrong, like if there are any alternative things to reverting the merge request, that would save a lot of headache and a lot of rounds for the dev on call, for the incident manager on call, and we would just follow the procedure described by the merge request author. So it would just, it would make things a bit more predictable. Like we know that in the incidents we have to prioritize restoring the working state of the system rather than figuring out the reason for the incident, right? So reverting always works, but it's just like it creates an overhead as well, both for the devs on call and for the merge request authors. And having the rollout plan would make things a bit more simple and straightforward, I think.
I think I had a comment on the agenda of this seems I feel like if an issue or some sort of thing we're shipping is worth a rollout plan, it's worth a feature flag. And I feel like the feature flag is be tightly coupled to how we plan on rolling things out. And so I think that might be an interesting aspect for us to explore improving. Is right now a lot of feature flag management is expected that, you know, whoever created the issue, you're kind of whoever created the feature flag, you're kind of managing it until we can remove it. But creating feature flags, and we're kind of there with some of the feature flag management that exists, but creating it so that anyone could pick it up and anyone understands the state that this is at. You know, what are the worst case scenarios this could happen if it's turned on, and things we expect from that. I think that's really smart. I think it would gel more into our current process if we couple it with feature flags, and because I think an issue worth a rollout plan like that is worth a feature flag.
That in itself is quite an interesting proposal, because that is something that could be worth looking at, sending back to Christopher and Tim, that if something is worth one of these rollout plans, it is probably worth wrapping in a feature flag. And maybe our feature flag rollout process needs to stay the single source of truth and just be expanded upon slightly with the good ideas they've offered here, such as metrics around it.
Technically, the feature flag rollout process is just one of the potential rollout plans cases. So it's not like the proposed rollout plan is not limited to the feature flags. So it's like it defines more sort of broader scope of the templates and broader scope of the potential rollout aware situations than just the feature flags. It's just a matter of like reading that documentation, that page. It's pretty boring, but it's you know, it requires some diving in and figuring out, like using real life examples, whether it is a good process or not. I think it's pretty good one.
So my biggest concern is opening the door for us to roll things out without feature flags, like anticipating that we've planned for stuff. And for some reason we thought we didn't need a feature flag or whatever. Like somewhere in our development guide, we say use feature flags, and that's our preferred method for rolling things out, because it's so easy to just turn it off. You don't have to revert MRs. We could do, and so I do see how this is addressing just how do we roll things out and planning all around that. But historically, feature flags is how we've done that. And I'm really concerned if we're looking at doing things other than feature flag. There's some very rare occasions where we don't need feature flags, I think, to roll things out, but I would, that's been the safest thing for us to do. And so I do see these next to each other.
Let me give you an example where we don't need the feature flag. We are working on a new feature for source header that is contained in one isolated extension. We don't need the feature flag there, because in this case, feature flag would create a lot of overhead. It would create unnecessary tension. If this extension is used in only one place, then in my rollout plan for that feature, for that extent, DMR introducing that extension, I could write, okay, if things go wrong, just remove this string in this module and we won't load this extension. That's it. We don't need to revert. We don't need to introduce the feature flag. We just change this one merge request. That's it. That's much simpler than dealing with feature flags, in my opinion.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, but that does still require another deployment. We either have to revert or we have to deploy. We remove this string or something like that. The benefit of the feature flag is, yeah, it's more work, but if we expect things to go wrong, if they possibly could, we want to be able to turn it off at runtime. We don't have it, and so that is traditionally just been our thinking. And so I'm gonna have to think about this some more, but I would be concerned if we think of rolling things out without that. If I think what's the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario isn't good, we should use a feature flag. And that's how we've traditionally done it. I'd be concerned about not doing that. But I do think it's related to the rollout plan. I just feel like we shouldn't replace feature flags with a rollout plan. I think they're going to be...
No. It's not about replacement by any means. No. It's just it's just like the rollout plan is kind of broader, has broader scope. That feature flag is just one particular implementation of the rollout plan.
Yeah,
so and it's not like using one or like either or.
Yeah. What were we gonna say, Enrique?
Sorry. No, I pasted in the document a link to the several rollout plan templates. Apparently, well, as Dennis mentioned, it's like the rollout plan is a superset of all of those strategies. Perhaps we can combine both of them, one or more. Also, like something that we could also consider is why feature flags have so much overhead as a process. Like, can we make simpler the process of creating and removing a feature flag? That could also help to have a single template, right? And always include feature flags in the rollout process.
The problem is that everything could be automated, and like we just set the feature flag with chat ops and then like remove the feature flag with chat ops. The problem is that we have to document these things anyway, and like any sort of documentation is an overhead. Like generating documentation automatically could be probably possible here. So like like CLI, it ideally, or something like CLI tool where you say, okay, I want to introduce a feature flag. You specify some, maybe even we have something like this. We specify, yeah, we do. I think when I started speaking about this, and I suddenly realized, damn, I think I have done this once. Yeah, like, so we do have this, but it's still the overhead of introducing this and passing it through the merge request review process, and then keeping like it's not even the introduction of the feature flag that brings the most overhead. It's the process of rolling it out and removing the feature flag that is usually the worst thing when it comes to time, and that thing cannot be automated, really.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate overhead part of it. I do understand that the rollout plan is a superset of how we manage with feature flags. Just with front end specifically, I realize database, there's things like you can't feature flag. You're gonna have to migrate things, whatever. And like, but I am concerned about the part of the rollout plans that we would consider that are not feature flags. I just know that we've traditionally in our guidelines, we've landed and come to the conclusion time and time again, like feature flags are the tool to use. They're a pain to manage, but it minimizes the risk to end users. That's how we should do it. But I do like thinking just from rollout plans decoupled from feature flags. I love that. How can we think about what's the worst thing that could happen? And that's a question we should always just be asking. And I think that's a good point.
And this is potentially, this might be one of the things in the rollout plan. Like, what is the worst case scenario? What can go wrong with this merge request? So just fill it out as the merge request author, and that is all. And it's like, you know, the whole product can go down. That's a wonderful answer, right?
I would love for that to be in our MR description, a big header. What's the worst that could happen? And everyone fills out, I don't know, bring down GitLab.com. Just every MR has the potential to
and it makes life of the maintainers so much easier. You know, like, okay, what is the worst case scenario? Okay, GitLab.com goes down. Okay, like merge or not merge? Well, let me think. Yeah,
that's funny. Yeah, I think this is good. And yeah, is this something? So you said this is new though, like there's still, okay, there. So maybe I would like to see some ways that we could influence, you know, just how this makes sense for our group. So yeah, early adopting this and figuring out how it makes sense. I think it's a cool thing to trailblaze. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Dennis.
I've just been able to skim the handbook page a little bit. I'm supportive of it as much as I can be, and will defer to all you as far as like introducing new engineering processes. But the one thing that struck me is I like the focus on defining the metrics that we're looking to improve, whether that's performance or, you know, usage or something like that. That obviously excites me as a product manager to be thinking about that early on, but also as a way to carry that through the MR and see, you know, have it tightly coupled to the feature and saying, this is something we expect to be able to observe. Are we instrumented correctly to observe that? If not, we need to make sure that's part of the MR. If we see something going in the opposite direction, like at least we know that, you know, I know there's a whole area of experimentation for this too, but it's a way to validate some of the product decisions as well. So discussion about feature flags aside, I'm supportive of the general process. I'll defer to all of you, as I said.
It's also, I think, at least for me personally, like it's a nice way of do a proper self-assessment of the feature. So if you like, I think making this as like a very valid part of this rollout plan, like what is the worst case scenario? What can go wrong? And like, if you're really about to write something pretty nasty in that field, this should ring the bell for you personally as the merge request author that, okay, apparently this implementation could and should be improved before it goes into the product. Because if that worst case scenario occurs, that's not going to be fun. So yeah, that's sort of like another way of assessing the impact of each particular merge request, really.
It is a good thinking tool. It is just not like something that we should adopt. It's something that put us in the right mindset about delivering high-risk features.
But I dropped some questions there that we don't have to answer right now, but just to be thinking about how we'd want to adopt this for our group. But where would we want a rollout plan for a feature to live? Like some things we work on almost have multiple issues for a single MR, and sometimes we have multiple MRs for a single issue. So I like how feature flags end up into having their own issue. But maybe, you know, we could just abstract that to like, here's just, you know, here's the rollout for this feature, and then we can include details about the feature flag in there or something. That would be interesting. I think it's also interesting, like in some of our discussion and looking at some of the handbook, the rollout plan seems to have both like requirements information and implementation information all together. So like when it's created, you kind of need to know what you're doing and have planned it, and you're already like working on it to some extent. So I almost see this as something that it's like most of agile things, like a really, really soft plan, just something that we continuously grow as, here's, some parts of it we can fill out ahead of time. But then as I've worked on it, as we've done like some sort of spike, oh, this definitely I need to add this to our rollout plan or something like that. As opposed to when we do feature flags rollouts, that's totally done like, MR is about to be merged. Oh, I need to create a feature. I need to create an issue for this feature flag thing. So I think this is cool how, because it's abstracted away from that feature flagness, we would be creating that plan in advance, causing us to think in a different perspective is really cool. Yeah, this is interesting.
I know, so David's not here to give the final word on it, but we can take it async as an action. But I think piloting it, or at least continuing the discussion under the assumption that we will pick something to pilot it with, would be the best next step. So we'll just do that, see how it goes. I think the feedback we can give during this would be helpful as well, if they're looking at a wider rollout of the rollout plan. Haha. With that, man, that's the sign that we should wrap. If I'm
the rollout
devolving
plan
into puns.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, everyone, and thanks for watching. If you are async catching up, I will see you all soon. Have a good rest of your day.
All right,
Take care.
Adios.